Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's Fexa and Friends Network show. Thank you for joining us and sharing a little bit of your day with us. I'm going to give everyone just a few more seconds to log on to the platform. We have quite a few registrants with us today, and we are right at the top of the hour. So let's wait just a few more seconds so everyone can join us, and then we'll get started momentarily. Okay. Yep, people are onboarding right now. I see them coming in. So we will get going. As with all Fexa and Friends Network shows, we hope that you are able to take away something from this and every show that we produce that you are able to use or at least expand your knowledge base in your professional life. I'm Dianna Hart, the host of the Fexa and Friends Network. The purpose of the Fexa Network is to be a place to offer education, best practices, and trend opinions to the multi-site facilities and service provider communities. If you have a topic that you would like to see on a future Fexa Network show, or if you would like to be an educator yourself, please drop me a line at fexafriendsnetwork@fexa.io. We hope you continue to support this growing effort to educate and uplevel the facilities management community by showing up and engaging with our topics. A quick note about Fexa, this program's primary sponsor. For those of you who don't know Fexa, we create smart, flexible, and easy-to-use facility management software for multi-site companies. Fexa transforms business processes into automations and workflows that find efficiencies that save time and resources. Fexa's data-driven asset management programs help companies track, analyze, and optimize repair or replace decisions. We also help companies track their refrigerant emissions for regulatory compliance and ESG reporting. For more information about Fexa and to request a demo, hop on over to fexa.io. I also want to let everyone know that even though your mics are muted, this show is interactive. And if you have a question for my guest educator today, please type your question into the Q&A window at any time during our conversation. We will get to as many questions as we have time for. If you have ever wanted to ask an expert about regulatory oversight when it comes to refrigerant compliance, today is your lucky day. So don't hold back. Because if you have questions and it's on your mind, very likely others will have those questions as well. And now we're going to turn to today's topic, EPA's AIM Act, how changes in HFC and refrigerant rules will affect your company. On October 6th, the EPA introduced new rules as part of the AIM Act and is now stepping in to ensure enough recycled HFCs are available, requiring better tracking of HFC containers and stricter labeling to prevent leaks. This Fexa and Friends Network show will focus on the recycling and handling of HFCs used in air conditioning, refrigeration, and cylinder tracking and labeling requirements for equipment. In this program, we will examine these new regulations, including the management of refrigerant updated labeling responsibilities. And with that in mind, I want to welcome my guest educator, Ted Atwood. Ted has dedicated the past 30 years to reducing refrigerant leak rates. He pioneered carbon market offset programs as a founding member of the Chicago Climate Exchange, recycling over 1,000 tons of refrigerants yearly. He also founded TrackRef, a Fexa solution, a blockchain-based compliance and sustainability software platform managing the life cycle of refrigerants and HVAC-R systems. Welcome to the show, Ted. We're excited to hear all about this topic.
Well, I'm glad you're excited. There's a lot to talk about. You want to turn over the screen sharing and I'll start to share my screen.
Will do.
All right. All right. Let's make sure I've got the right screen shared. Can you see that?
Yep.
Diana? Great.
Sure can.
Okay. I like to start by making sure everyone knows, take what Diana said at the beginning seriously. Stop me anytime along the way. I'll even pause throughout here to make sure that we get any questions answered, because what the EPA is proposing here in subsection H is fairly significant. It's the most significant change to EPA regulations ever. Almost to the point where we have to go back to 1994 before we see anything this significant. And EPA has 30 years of both case history and regulatory updates that they've managed, and they took advantage of all of that experience, and they really made a very dense regulatory structure here in subsection H. There's only a few big topics, but the reason I start at the beginning by saying, please don't hesitate to stop us along the way. Raise your hand, ask your questions in the chat box, or don't hesitate to ask to be unmuted. We'll talk through it. Is because although I've read this about 8 times, I don't feel like I have a definitive answer for everything, but I have a very good grasp of most of the content. And this extends beyond the boundaries of EPA subsection H. In order to really understand what EPA is doing here, as you'll find out as we go through this, there are other segments of EPA like RCRA, other segments that exist that we're all familiar with, but maybe we haven't visited in a while, like ASHRAE standards, or new standards that are evolving. We might even talk a little bit about 6335, the mechanical code changes. We're just going to jump in. I want to start with the fact that there are essentially 10 significant proposed changes. There are really more, but I kept it to 10. And if you joined the last discussion, we talked about the 15-pound threshold and the newness at the time. We had only done a 2-read review on the regulation, but here they are: 15-pound threshold, cylinder tracking. Reclaim plays a heavy role in meeting market needs. Heels in virgin cylinders and reclaimed cylinders will be tracked, and they are key to a post-2028 service and installation opportunity for our systems that have a higher than 53 GWP. There is a proposed 85-15 blend. We're going to start off with that topic just about. There is a requirement that new equipment will require 100% reclaimed refrigerant. Now, this is proposed, so you can still comment, and there will be a lot of comments on this. There's a responsibility for cylinder tagging and registration, as well as asset tagging. And although I've listed asset tagging here as part of subsection H, it was actually part of the technology transition, but they pair up because of dates. So we'll go over that. Mobile vehicles are impacted, but not through EPA 609. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about flammable refrigerants and RCRA a little bit. And throughout this, we'll refer back to the GWP of 53 that EPA has set as their limit. All right, as anyone who's doing screen captures, this is a recap of what we talked about in the last discussion. Not important, but I thought if you're doing a screen grab, this would be a good summary to grab. And I want to start with the chin punch here. If you feel like there's a bit of an uncertain future, you would be right. The EPA's, sorry about that. The EPA's requirement that there be an 85-15 blend, 85% reclaim, 15% virgin. which follows the California reclaim blend level, would ultimately mean that we would have access in 2028 to 69,000 pounds maximum of 404 if we used the 2021 reclaim result numbers. I consider this the chin punch because ultimately reclaim becomes a very important part of our future supply needs. And 69,000 pounds does not equal 1 day's worth of present day 404 demand. Any day. Today, we're going to use more than 69,000 pounds. We're going to use closer to 90,000 pounds of 404 in the United States. So that should give you some idea of the scale and scope of the impact from this regulation. Now, remember, it is proposed, all right? So it means that these things will likely undergo some changes or modifications. But it's important for you to know what is in here. And it's also important if you have questions or comments or a discussion, because this is pre-regulatory action. So we have until a couple of weeks to get our comments in. Now, I'll start off by saying you're probably familiar with everything in this chart. Comfort cooling, refrigeration, process cooling. All of these responsibilities, except for the far right column, are things that if you're managing any appliance over 50 pounds, you're already doing all of these things. The far right column, the tagging, is referred to in the technology transition release that happened only a few weeks ago in the Federal Register, and it goes into effect for certain dates starting in January 2025. Now, what's key here is anything 15 pounds and over will have to meet these same responsibilities. So no longer 50, now we're down to 15. So I know you've probably thought about it if you've been paying attention to this, and maybe you talk to your team. I know I've taken a lot of phone calls from a lot of people asking, when can we consider it installed? When do we have to have it labeled and tagged? When will we get access to this refrigerant QR code database? And so we have all that information in here. But I think it's key to know that if you've only been tracking maybe 25 or 30 or 50 pound and over appliances, because that is your regulatory familiarity, now going down to 15 pounds puts a dramatic increase on your resources, a significant increase on your resources in order to be able to meet that requirement. Now, the good news is, as we explained in the last meeting, the 50-pound action will go into place immediately after this has been published in the Federal Register. That means we have to get through the comment period. There'll be some changes, but once those changes have been adopted by EPA, they won't share them with us. They'll just release the amended subsection H regulation with the changes in it. So it's important to note that what we see here, the next time we see something published, it will be after those amendments have been taken into consideration, the comments, excuse me. Two things the EPA did a really nice job of here is they clearly defined install. Install on a self-contained unit is when you acquire it. Install on a field assembled unit is when you charge it. Now, I get this call at least once a week. I don't know how many years, maybe decades, people call and ask. I don't know the install date, so I'm not going to give you a date. The EPA clearly says, if you don't know the install date, you have an incomplete record, you'll be in violation. Because if you look to the far right, that tagging column is part of the regulatory requirement that is already in law. It's already becoming a regulation as part of the technology transition. So I'm going to stop there. Does anyone have any questions at all? All right, I'm looking. No questions.
So far, not.
All right. Again, It's very important. I get this call all the time, even from my own operations people. They'll call and say, I just don't have the date, so we're not going to put a date in for install. The date of install or acquisition is as important to EPA as the weight and the refrigerant type. All right, that's really a very powerful, clean, absolutely defined statement. So that means you have to find, when were all those 15-pound units installed? And that's probably going to be one of your bigger challenges going forward. I don't, in the comments, the EPA, if you've read through this, does talk about, feedback that they got from the marketplace regarding knowledge on appliance information. But basically the EPA saying, we can't do our job unless you have the right information. So you'll have to seek some guidance from your advisors or legal teams, but you will have to come up with an install date, because that date triggers the EPA's authority and responsibility. Eric, the date of install is a good question, is the day that either you acquired a self-contained unit or you charged a field assembled unit. Does that make sense? I'm going to hit yes for now. Cynthia, will this impact currently installed systems or system installed after the date? It affects all systems 15 pounds and over in a year when the tagging starts. I have a slide. The next slide will give you some of the dates. And I've been working with the marketing people. By the way, it's so nice to be part of this Fexa family, because I can turn something over to Mac instead of my rough drawn, poorly developed chemical engineering background oriented marketing. You'll get something nice and clean. And it's a cheat sheet for how to look at these dates and when things are affected. But I'll share a snippet in a second. But the answer is, Cynthia, it's all equipment 50 pounds and over as soon as this regulation goes into effect. And then roughly 12 months after that, it'll be 15 pounds and over, regardless of when it was installed. Norma, is the technology tagging requirement in effect now? No, not yet. The next slide will show the dates, some of the dates. I selected a few that I thought were important, but it will be within the next, let's say, 13 months for about everything. All right, will this presentation be available to show to others and review? Robert, I'll leave that up to Dianna, but what I would say is this is a journey best walked together. So reach out, because it's a discussion, but yes, I believe we'll make it available, right, Dianna?
Yes, we will. We'll make the presentation and the recording available. So absolutely, all of the assets will be available.
Eric, define acquisition. All right, acquisition is the date you purchased it or paid for it. You bought it on June 1st. That's the day you own it. That's the day you're tracking it. All right, I'm going to clear some of these out. Okay, good. Next. Come on. There we go. All right. Okay, assets and cylinders have to be tagged and registered. Now, for those of you who've been working in California, you know what registration means. It means synchronizing databases, disparate databases. I can't wait for this. It should be very interesting. But what I will tell you is the EPA has developed a full life cycle view of both the cylinders and the assets in the way they've defined this. Now, anything in red to the right is part of EPA's technology transition regulation, which is already complete. This is fully baked. Now, the dates under installation or compliance are part of subsection 8554 from subsection H. So what we do is we match the date to the equipment type and then the profile information here at the bottom. And as I said, the Fexa marketing team is going to turn out a really nice cheat sheet for this with there's 4 different profiles. There's really 6 different profiles, because one of the profiles is for ice machines, and for the ice machines, you actually have to publish the ice generation rate. That's important. That's only for appliances 200 pounds and over. I should also, well, and it might be for appliances under 200 pounds. Also, I do have a couple of questions. You'll see it says pending question here on the upper right. EPA is seeking comments on a few things, but what they left a couple of gaps, I'm sure they were unintentional, around, for instance, the harvest rate of ice produced for ice rinks. It doesn't say, but I'll get that information and we'll publish it as part of an update. Now, this is only a snippet. There's several, I think altogether there's 72 different equipment subtypes. I have to remind myself, category is either process cooling, comfort cooling, or refrigeration category, and then the subtypes related to it. But you have them here in front of you. So technically, starting January 1, 2025, let me see if I've got this little pointer. Hold on. Yeah. You'll see the first date is ice rinks. All right. Also, I want to note, we're going to talk about refrigerated transport. The tagging and labeling responsibility for refrigerated transport may be our industry's greatest short-term challenge. So everything in red is already identified as a regulation. It's fully baked. The Federal Register is published with the final regulation. So keep in mind, this is not up for comments. All right. There's no questions on this. Is cylinder tracking and tagging required for all refrigerants or just high GWP? Anything with a GWP of 53 and greater is what the EPA has identified in the proposed regulation. Maybe that moves or changes. I don't see that happening, but it's possible. But as of right now, it's anything with a GWP of 53 and greater. Right. I think that's it. No outstanding questions. I'm going to go to the next slide. Look, this is a really important slide because we're going to talk a little bit more about cylinder tagging. But once you have an asset registry for systems, and I still have some questions for EPA around this asset registry, and I also have some questions to them around how the tagging works. Oops, sorry about that. So I would not say this is completed, but this is the structure as proposed, with some outstanding issues still to be considered. All right, so what are the maintenance requirements? What are the ALDS requirements? Well, here they are. Comfort cooling. Annually within 12 months of the date of the final rule publication. There is a caveat in EPA. I don't know the specifics of it, like the exact wording, but it is something to the effect that EPA has to give 12 months on any published regulation. That's why you'll see everything say within 12 months of the date of final rule publication. This is the 15-pound rule. As I mentioned, it's 12 months out. But as you notice from the 50-pound rule, it's effective immediately. But it relates, in this case, to systems that had to have refrigerant added to them or the circuit opened. So 50 to 499 pounds, it would be starting immediately, as I said. So anything that you have to add refrigerant to would then have to have an annual leak inspection until you prove that the leak is no longer viable. What I mean by that, and this is very important, we in the industry have a perception of a leak is repaired when we give it the final verification test update. We say, thumbs up, we did not find a leak after we added refrigerant and we fixed what we thought was the leak. However, if that system leaks again in the next 12 months, then the EPA does not consider that leak to be remedied. So that leak is not remedied until for a period of 12 months, it never leaks again. I did a little bit of review. 7% of systems, it looks like, in this one ecosystem of data that I pulled from, seem to have perpetual leaks where they leak year over year. And you may have your own anecdotal information, but I wanted to get a reference point. So that's fairly significant that's endemic leak situation. But it would mean that the leak is not repaired for 12 months after the last time refrigerant was added to it. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, you keep going. All right, cylinder tracking. Take a look, disposable cylinders, January 1, 2025. All right. Or 12 months from the date of the final rule publication. The expectation is that this will be published sometime around January 1, 2024, although I think it might be a little bit later. But I'll tell you, the EPA has been moving very quickly, and this regulation was incredibly well done. In order to get through this regulation, anyone who tells you they read the regulation will also tell you that they had to read at least 6 other regulatory actions and rulemakings in order to get through it. There's that many relationship boundaries between this rule and other rules. All right, Eric, even though leaks are stopped, but then new leaks are found at a later time within 12 months, yes. Regardless of the leak location, an asset that continues to leak, regardless of where the leak is still an active leaky system. And I don't mean it in the fact that it's active and leaky. I mean that the EPA does not qualify it to be leak-free until 12 months after the last time refrigerant has been added. Does that make the system non-compliant? Non-compliant, this is equipment that's just historically leaked. It could still leak and be compliant, but if you can't fix the leak, then you have to take other actions. So anybody who's been tracking things on an Excel spreadsheet, just consider that era done. It's over. The do-it-yourself model doesn't give you enough information. I don't need to make a pitch here for TrackRef. You're all here to learn something. But I'll tell you, for 30 years, the most responsible companies have been the ones who are trying to get ahead of those leaks, and it happens every day. Doing it from an Excel spreadsheet and creating alerts and notifications and managing interactions between various vendors and being able to look back 12 months in real time, it's very hard to do on an Excel spreadsheet. So it will require to have an ALDS. Eric, I don't know the answer to that. I think some people may choose to do an ALDS, but I would say that'll be up to the individual, and we may see more things retrofitted. I don't know. I talked to a company this morning, and they're already at maximum capacity for retrofitting, and they're already stretched their maintenance budget as far as they can. Their CapEx budget is maxed. Their OpEx budget is maxed. This is really going to be a paradigm shift in the way we approach fixing leaks. But that's a bit of speculation. But I feel pretty strongly that if these are not the dates, they're very close to what the EPA will do. And we can see that within 2 years of right now, all these things will be tracked. And the EPA has proposed that by November of 2024, they'll have an active sandbox for us to all train in and practice in, or at least view in the cylinder tracking and asset tracking world. So they've proposed this training, orientation, engagement, fourth quarter of next year. And also, anybody who's worked with TrackRef knows we'll be eager and aggressive to automate an interaction with EPA so that we can streamline that interaction with them and reduce the number of keystrokes it takes to accomplish it. But it's also very important to point out that if you are the kind of company that's thinking, because there's still 2 outstanding questions here, it requires that the tag be on the tank by these dates, which means if you're storing inventory and you've got, let's say, 30,000 pounds of stored inventory, technically, and I've asked this in the EPA, it's also going to be in my comments, technically, it seems as though the EPA is expecting that the entire inventory will be tagged and labeled by that date. Now, there's a whole lot of things here around heels, but you can expect that there's going to be a very difficult but high bar to accomplish this type of informational awareness throughout your entire ecosystem. Now, if you're a grocer or a company that outsources your service, you're thinking, wow, I'm glad I don't own refrigerant. You're still responsible for making sure that cylinder is tagged and labeled on your property. So this is a shared responsibility across the entire industry, and the EPA does talk about it throughout the section regarding cylinder tracking. All right, any other questions? All right. I think we're good. We're going to keep rolling. All right, why does this matter? This is actually the reclaim numbers, which you can get from the EPA's website, going back to 2000. I want you to notice we've been in a downward trend here, and we are right about 15 million pounds. Folks, this is worrisome. We've never crossed the 20 million pound boundary. I was a reclaimer for 2 decades. We were fortunate to have a really great collection network. We got over 2 million pounds a year, but I can tell you there are very few reclaimers that reach over 2 million pounds. You can count them on your hands. You probably know their names. This is a hard job. Refrigerant doesn't make itself easy to transport, and it's about to get even harder. In a few minutes, I'll share with you the upgraded RCRA responsibilities for transportation on some of these refrigerants. But as you can see, reclaim is trending downward. Now, since 2017, we did see a little bump here in 2019. That was an exciting year, but we also saw lower prices during the 2019 year. Now, we have dropped dramatically, and I pulled out some of the more significant refrigerants. I ignored, for the purpose of today's discussion, I pulled out some refrigerants that are very popular, like R22, the most popular refrigerant. Ooh, sorry. I'm not hitting anything. All right, 123, 134. These are all pretty normal. 2 of the more confusing refrigerants to get your arms around are things like other HFCs and mixed. Mixed is legitimately mixed when it's documented here at EPA. This might be a service provider who has refrigerant on a truck and they don't have enough cylinders, but they have to do recovery. I do not record this as either an improvement or a loss in inventory because it is unusable. This has to be destroyed in most cases. Some reclaimers have the ability to separate, but this is usually so mixed that you're not really separating 404 from 22. You're having to separate R125 from 404. It's that complicated. You're taking apart blends, and that's a much different job and responsibility. But as you can notice, a lot of refrigerants are trending down. 22 down. You can see all the numbers. 407 is trending up. That's a good sign. But as I shared with you at the beginning of this slide, based on these numbers, using an 85-15 blend ratio, so 85% of this would then be able to be blended with a 15% virgin, would give you 69,000 pounds. This will give you somewhere around 450,000 pounds. However, it might not be as valuable as you think when you consider that how you get that material back to yourself can be very complicated by making sure that whatever service provider you have in the reclaim space has tagged it and labeled it, identified it for you in a way that you can bring that back. But overall, reclaim still only represents 2% of market use, and it's down by 7% 2020 to 2021. I suspect when EPA gets around to releasing the 2022 numbers, which they're behind on, but for obvious reasons, it's busy, we'll see that number probably about the same or probably maybe slightly lower. I don't expect to see it go up. Any questions on this? Right? I keep rolling. I hope you guys are finding this valuable. There we go. Okay. So the 85-15 blend that I keep talking about. Remember I mentioned to you, or you may remember that I mentioned to you that there are several other regulations you have to read. One of them would be the report that EPA used as the underpinning for the values related to the refrigerant heels, the refrigerant demand. They have all kinds of names for this. It's called it the tailing report in past. But the report publishes several scenarios. You see them listed here, scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they gave a range of between a half pound per cylinder left over to 2 pounds of cylinder of gas left in heels. This is an important inventory item. The EPA has done 2 things here. These are great. Number one, they've said, you're not going to like this part, so I'll say this is a great, it's not really necessarily great, but it's important. You have to send disposable cylinders back to a reclaimer. You can no longer puncture them and throw them in the landfill or the scrap metal bin. That's not allowed. Now you have to send them back to a reclaimer, whether you send it through a wholesaler or whether you send it direct. It has to go back to a reclaimer. All disposable cylinders have to end their life at a reclaimer. That's big. Process that. While you're processing it, the numbers on this page are the reason why. Based on the scenarios that EPA ran, and they worked with several refrigerant companies to do this, they were able to determine that between 2.5 and 9 million pounds of material would be added to the inventory for future supply. And what I think is smart here is by analyzing the cylinders at such a depth, and by the way, this is the 3rd report. EPA has published 3 of these since 1999. And in every one of these reports, the heels have ranged from between 3/4 pound to 3 pounds. The earliest report was closer to 3 pounds. This report was closer to 1.5 pounds on the cylinders that they selected randomly for sampling for weight. So this is a significant amount of refrigerant. So I think this is great that the EPA is saying, hey, we're going to let virgin gas that's in a heel of a cylinder that we're forcing you to send back be accounted for as reclaim. So it's no longer virgin, and now it can become part of future post-refrigerant use opportunities. The confusing thing they did that we have comment on is related to the term bona fide. We're unfamiliar what bona fide use means. They weren't really clear on it. They do state it 3 times throughout the document. So we have asked EPA to clarify bona fide use. I just published a blog yesterday on this topic. One of our comments was in there related to bona fide. I think there are some vulnerabilities. For instance, if you have a cylinder and it's got 20 pounds in it and you send it back to your reclaim partner and you say, hey, this is the heel left in the tank, is that allowable? So anyways, we're seeking clarity on that from EPA. No questions. All right, keeping going. What is required? What do you have to put on this label? All right, well, this is the information. One of the things that we're seeking clarity on from EPA is related to the batch. EPA does refer to a batch several times, but they don't refer to whether the batch is the gas amount or the cylinder. So if you filled all the cylinders on one day of R404, 507, R22, would that all be a batch? Would that, because it does reference the day it was filled? So would it be, 11/30, 2023 as the batch? That's not enough. We think We think the EPA needs to be a little bit clearer on that. But this is the information. This is also on the cheat sheet that we'll be sharing, and I'm sure it'll be a much nicer marketing outcome than the one I'm providing here, but at least the information's there. All right, either everybody's fallen asleep or Diana, any questions so far?
Yeah, I'm watching like a hawk, and right now, no open questions. I know you almost want to say Bueller, but riveting information. We just don't have any questions right now. Oh, here we go. Melissa has a question. Not sleeping. She says, just freaking out. Oh, let's provide
Melissa,
some comfort here, Ted. I think that's really what we need to be doing here.
yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, I was actually updating this presentation up till 3 minutes before we had it. I was supposed to be on vacation this week. I can't go. This is an overwhelming data set to get through, and we want to get our comments in to EPA on time, which it's the 18th. It takes about 10 readings. I'm a slow learner. I have to go through these things. I mean, I'm at 8 times. It's going to be 10 before I get my comments in. And I can't just read EPA's subsection H. I have to read all the associated rulemakings as well. So, yes, Melissa, the 18th of December is when all the comments have to be in. But, I'll tell you this. The one thing I've learned from it so far is none of this is impossible. None of this is new. And I know at least a handful of companies doing all of this already. And I know a few companies that are doing a great job on cylinders. I don't want to name names, but there are some companies that are doing an amazing job tracking and labeling cylinders. And I would say that's the number one phone call I'm getting right now after we talk about labeling 15-pound and over assets. For any of you participated in our SB 253 discussion, which is the California rule regarding emission reporting, most of these things are going to have to be done for that rule anyways, in some form. So this labeling and tracking, it's nice. It's clear. It might be overwhelming, but it's manageable, and we've seen it work at scale. All right. We're going to talk about mobile vehicles, but not EPA 609. I was a little surprised by this. So I have spent, hold on. That should only be 5 to 8%, not 508%. All right. So that's a typo.
So we'll correct that before we send out the final presentation, right, Ted?
Yes, we will. My apologies. So anyways, I was very surprised to see EPA target transportation, but not EPA 609. They clearly say we are not here today under subsection H to change any of EPA 609, but we are addressing mobile transport related refrigeration and comfort cooling. So it's not a sector I spent a lot of time in over the last 20 years. I mean, I've done my share of trains, and I did work with a couple of the larger train companies over the last 20 years. And they do house a decent amount of refrigerant. But now, because of the 15-pound threshold, trains, municipalities, Amtrak, BNSF, they all have lots of refrigerated containers, and they all have enough refrigerant to trigger the responsibility, and EPA calls it out. EPA also did some updating to the NAICS codes earlier this year, June, July. Important to profile that. That does tie in to what they're doing here a little bit. So this morning, I was scrambling to get this number. Now, I talked to 3 large refrigerated transport companies, and I received very detailed information from them this morning. Their average charge was between 13 and 18 pounds. I did talk to a Transicold company this morning, 2 grocers the other day, and 2 service companies today as well that do just reefer transport. Both those service companies are out of California. And so we talked is there enough charge to, because the EPA does refer to reefer transport. And EPA also has published several things regarding reefer transport. So over the last 3 years, so all of this does fit this group. I think passenger buses, again, municipalities, school buses that have refrigeration or comfort cooling on them. Yeah, they're responsible. And it's important to note that they're also responsible for tagging and labeling, tracking and maintenance, the registry, leak inspections, chronically leaky, all the same things. And one of the items missing from some people's emission calculations, I pulled this together this morning, is over in this column right here. Additional loss factor considerations in the either industry published information. All of this information came from some industry published information. I did refer to insurance companies. They're a great source of information, but I found almost all of these numbers either from the EPA or from something like container insurance companies or service companies that do work at the end of life. Information came from EPA, one of their recent publications. Annual losses they determined were between 2 and 12 pounds from all these units. And there's a ton of information out there, but synthesizing it so that it makes sense and understanding what EPA was trying to accomplish, because that's not published in the subsection H guidelines, rulemaking or proposed rulemaking. This was the harder part. So I'm really comfortable with these numbers. If you own a fleet of transportation related vehicles that have any of these units in them, consider this to be one of those interesting frontiers that you might face in the coming year. All right, any questions here? This is a real brand new section. So we're getting close, guys. We have a few more slides. I'm going to get through them quick. All right, this is just an impact slide, and this is a lot of estimating. I went back. We've always believed that the EPA 608 only impacted about 5% of assets. I think we're pros on this one. We're very knowledgeable in this space. It's important to note that maybe some of these other numbers are a bit subjective. I'm doing my best to make a bunch of assumptions around the amount of equipment, the amount of impact. I have another slide in a second I'll show you that came from AHRI that helps. But essentially, you should note that because of cylinder tracking, 100% of all refrigerant will be under the purview. 100% of all refrigerant with a GWP of 53 or greater will be under the purview of EPA. And right now, that represents just about every building in the United States. 4 million is the estimated commercial building population for buildings 10,000 square feet and over. So no stone has gone unturned by EPA in their life cycle. All right, so now this is related to reclaim required for initial charge. This is another section by EPA. And it says, if it's an affected appliance, then you have to charge it with reclaim. This is the proposal. It's not a rule yet. But assuming this goes through, I pulled the numbers. I had to do some averaging here, but I feel like this is a fairly educated guess. In this column, this is about 4 tons of cooling. I'm averaging the size of the BTUs from the AHRI annual publication, and I came up with about half of this. The overall demand for new equipment is about 78 million pounds a year. This is a rough number. It's probably not exactly 78. Could be 70. It could be 90. This is a good average. It's just here for reference, okay? This is not a fact-finding effort. If this is referentially what the number that we use, then in order to meet the demand for just the GWP 53 and greater equipment that's sold above 15 pounds, we'll need about 16 million pounds of reclaimed refrigerant just for new equipment. And why this matters is that only represents about 15 to 20% of the market demand for refrigerant. So that means 5 to 7 times greater numbers are needed in reclaim. So if we go back to our reclaim numbers and we say, all right, we're doing 15 million pounds a year, we need about 7 times that to meet market demand in 2028 using the business as usual model today. So if you're thinking, hey, all this stuff Ted's telling us that's in this document, or all the stuff I've read, I think I can block and deflect. The block and deflect days are over. All right, that's done. Because you will not be ready to meet your servicing demands. And I'm going to add in a couple more things that you need to think about that are also in this regulation. Do I have any questions? Somebody has raised their hand.
Negatory. Not that I can see.
Eric, can we unblock Eric? Or Eric, you took it down. Okay, fair enough.
Oh no, we do. We have a question. Nope, still freaking.
Let's adjust. Honestly, I'm a little freaked out because this isn't even the whole regulation. There's still another couple layers.
Do you need an adult beverage at this point? Day drinking is a thing. I shouldn't advocate that. Okay, Bo has a question.
Bo,
what happens if there just isn't enough for new equipment? I think that's an excellent question. I've been thinking about that myself. Yep.
Yeah, Bo, I don't have an answer for you. I think that's why we might see EPA moderate on some of these. I'm expecting comments.
Yeah.
I'm advising everyone, make your comments, it doesn't hurt. But remember, EPA has just spent the last 30 years developing this regulation. And the people and I'm going to talk about cost in a second, Bo, because it's very important. And the very people that were responsible for the CFCs and the HCFCs and the HFCs are still responsible. They're smart people. They've been through courts, numerous presidents, lots of members of Congress, tons of changes to the work environment, and lots of challenges from the industry. And they took all that into consideration when they wrote this. So these are smart people. The rule is actually very well thought out from the perspective of doing the one thing that EPA has been challenged with. EPA is not challenged to make sure you have enough refrigerant in 2030. They're there to make sure that the phase down takes place between 2023 and 2036. That's what they're responsible for. They're not even responsible for enforcement. That's the Department of Justice. So, Bo, I have been asked this question about pricing. I have seen the price, and I don't know how many of you on this call track pricing, but many of you probably do. I have seen the price of 404 go down month over month since April. And what might happen, Bo, is because there's tons of stored up refrigerant. There are brokers out there, Bo, that are sitting on 20, 30, 50 million pounds of refrigerant. Because that now has to be tagged and labeled and get into the QR coded system by EPA by 2026, we might see that material flood onto the market. And as a result, lower the price. It's a possibility. But I'm still working for a living, so I'm not that great at speculating. I'm just saying it's one of the many options that might take place. All right. What is the start date of not punching cylinders and throwing them away? Kevin, those are, hold on. Those are back here. Go to the cylinder section. Right here, Kevin. We're 1 year out on disposable cylinders. All right. Okay. Let's keep going. Charge ahead.
Just a quick time check, Ted, we're about 6 minutes to the top of the hour when we do have to wrap
I got
it up.
you. Almost the entire last section's on something called RCRA. Look, flammable refrigerants are entering our stream. our consumption stream, our use stream, everything. It means they're entering the supply chain in a way that requires storage and inventory. EPA recognizes that. They also, for the last 3 years, have been talking to us through these rulemakings. They've had many rulemakings, many discussions around this. Also, you have to read through SNAP rulings, RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act. It is a much stricter segment of EPA's regulatory arsenal. And that is where flammable materials sit, the regulatory structure, the rulemaking around flammable materials, which are A2Ls, A2s, A3s, but most commonly right here in the A2L, A2 category. Those materials now fall under RCRA. They're much smaller charge in many cases, for the A3s like propane, butane, but they're still in there. And there is a chance that you would end up recovering an A3. There are still some, because this is proposed, there are still some outstanding questions in this space, which we intend to ask and hope to get feedback from EPA, or at least recognition. But because these materials are now part of our work environment, now EPA has to manage them using the appropriate ruling. So here are some of the more popular ones. For instance, I ordered some 454. I have a Trane unit at my house. I wanted to retrofit it. It has not arrived. When I talked to Trane, I found out that Trane was waiting to ship my 454 until they had a leak detector that will pick up parts per million emissions and then shut off my unit so that it will no longer leak, or at least be operating if a leak does occur. So it'll be completely shut down. Until that leak detector is available, which is about $1,500, I found out, so I'm not really excited about this. Until that leak detector is available, I'm unable to retrofit my unit. But you get an idea of the A2Ls, okay? And I even threw a B1 in here, all right? B is toxicity. All right, so ammonia is a B. All right, so 514A. Here are the GWPs. This is why these guys, this is why this is happening. They have a very low GWP. Now you're drinking from the fire hydrant. I get it. Melissa, I hear you loud and clear. But here's what RCRA does. It forces us to change our literacy around how we ship things. It's not the same type of placarding any longer. It's not the same type of storage. It's not the same type of documentation. Documentation is much more stringent in the RCRA space than it has been. And it's also costlier. Your shippers are going to charge a higher amount for transporting this material. All right, what does this mean? If you're in the supply chain, you have other responsibilities. Let's say you're a merchant. You can store up to 20,000 pounds in a non-sprinklered system, or 40,000 pounds in sprinkler. I mean, if you are a merchant, sorry. Warehousing, about the same. They treat them the same. Filling facility, if it's not sprinkled, it goes down to 10,000 pounds. So if you have a reclaim facility or a bottling facility or a packaging facility, you're going to want to sprinkler it. If you're storing material and it's warehoused in just a Quonset hut or a really inexpensive storage facility, you're only able to store 20,000 pounds. Now, there's some other rules. This is really a summary, but I wanted you to get an idea that there are responsibilities around designating a coordinator. You have to have a hazardous material business plan, aisle space requirements, like how much distance between two pallets, the ceiling, the roof, the wall. You have to be able to navigate if you're a fire or emergency person. And it's all because of this little flammable placard. Now, there's not too many R32 cylinders floating around out there. These are 21-pound systems. But you get the idea that this industry has been talking about this issue for a very long time. Sorry. So this will all be in the presentation. Last slide. Actually, it's 2 more slides, but we'll go quickly. Look, waste stream management and RCRA have to be added to your service model and discussion with clients. And if you're an owner operator, you've got to make sure that your vendors are going to tag and label cylinders. You don't want to be found liable for having a black market cylinder end up filling one of your systems. EPA is very clear about their definition for each one of these things. Now, in 18 months, about 80% of the commercial equipment will be covered. 15 pounds and over, GWP above 53. Folks, I've been doing this 30 years. We went from 22 to 410. We have all these distributed systems on the roof. I mean, I could talk all day about how these distributed systems were probably built to offset or get underneath the 50-pound threshold. That's over. Now everything is on the radar. But regardless, in 24 months, since all cylinders are going to be impacted, technically there's no ignoring the changes that are coming. Norma, it's for systems and cylinders in different time frames. But over the next 3 years, Norma, it'll be most systems. But in the next 2 years, it's all cylinders. And Anonymous, where does the responsibility lie when equipment from a manufacturer is leaking when delivered to your facility? What's the best way to handle this? I don't have an answer for you on that. I do know that you're responsible for it once you take possession of it. So you'll have to have a discussion with the manufacturer.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I hope we're wrapping up because we are a minute over the top of the hour. Okay. Are you ready to wrap up?
I'm done.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, and I know it was a lot of information today. Oh my goodness. So just so you know, we will be emailing everyone a link to the recording of today's show, along with the resources that we have exposed to you today. So that means the presentation that you have seen and any additional collateral that the marketing team over at Fexa has prepared and is ready to ship. We will send links along with that as well. But you will definitely get a copy of the presentation at least over the next couple of days. So please be on the lookout for that. The Fexa website stores all of the Fexa and Friends shows 24/7 on the Fexa the home landing page. And we also have a YouTube channel for the Fexa and Friends shows that make all of our shows available 24/7. And that will be available in just a couple of days in our resource library. So thank you for joining us today. It was a great show, full of information, a lot to digest, and a lot to be concerned about. So try to get some sleep tonight and know that Ted is here for us. If we have additional questions, I will be sending out ways to contact Ted as well. If you have additional questions for him, he is here as a fantastic resource in this space. Thank you again, everyone. We will have a couple of more presentations from Ted before the end of the year. So stay tuned for information and invitation to a couple of shows that will be happening in the very near future. Thank you again and have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.